This is my 2006 Bluebird Vision with a Cat C7 engine, air ride and air brakes. I bought it in September of 2023 for the low price of $2,500 and I'm going to convert it into my own personal permanent home. It may seem cliche, but when I first started this project, I had expectations of how this project may go. Let me tell you, this was very different from what I expected. When you watch videos of people doing bus conversions like I have, there are a lot of details that most seem to gloss over. And so, when I made the spontaneous decision to document my journey converting my own bus, I decided that I wanted to show the things that no one else seems to. I don't have the best video equipment or the highest level of editing proficiency, so I'm honored that you chose to take the time to watch my silly little channel, and I hope you enjoy every minute. This week we continue with stripping down the interior of this bus, but before that, I figured I should probably give you the backstory of how I ended up with my Bluebird. When I first started to seriously look for buses, I had a plethora of options available to me. However, I was very much limited in what I could afford because of a bankruptcy from a few years earlier. I won't get into the details of what happened there, but it seriously affected my ability to borrow money. I went and saw two buses, the first of which was a flat nose with a Cummins diesel in it that I absolutely adored. Unfortunately, the guy wanted 10 grand for it, which wasn't unreasonable, but when I went to contact my loan provider, they told me that the maximum that I could borrow was $4,500, so that one was unfortunately out. Next, I went to see an International, which I also liked, but at the time I had my heart set on the flat nose, and wasn't aware that the flat nose wouldn't have been an option for me. So by the time I realized that the International was probably the better option, it was already gone. Eventually I was browsing Kijiji, which is basically the Canadian version of Craigslist, and I came across someone who was selling 4 buses for $3 grand each. I immediately jumped on the opportunity and set up a time to go have a look. The story that I was told was that during the pandemic, this film production crew bought these buses so that they would have enough social distancing space for when they shuttled the actors from one location to another. Now, before you get all excited about famous people having ridden my bus, keep in mind that I have no idea what movies these people worked on, so there's a very, very low chance that anyone famous used my bus. And even if somebody famous did happen to use my bus, it doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. Either way, it's a cool story, and it offered me the opportunity to have a decent bus for a good price because the filming company didn't need them anymore and was simply trying to just get rid of them. Now, because they were shuttle buses, they came with air ride, air brakes, and built-in side luggage compartments, which was a huge benefit for me. By the time I got to the lot, one of the buses had been sold already, so I had the choice between 3 options. The one I ended up buying was $500 cheaper because one of the batteries was no good, and they're pretty pricey to replace, so I ended up with this bus for $2,500. It's very rare to find a bus in running driving condition for that cheap, and the engine alone was worth more than what I ended up paying. Now, I still had to get it towed to where I have it now, and that cost me an extra $1,300 because of the distance it needed to go. This was still the most economic option available to me though, because I didn't have my air brakes license yet, and the bus was also not registered for the road. So I would have had to get a temporary permit, which in Ontario is like pulling teeth, or I could take my chances, drive it home, and hope I don't get caught. The latter option seemed like too large of a risk for me, especially with what the fines would have been if I'd been caught. So I figured the extra $1,300 wasn't unreasonable. Altogether, even though this bus has had some issues, to this day I'm still happy with my purchase. I do kinda wish I'd found a bus without air brakes, but beggars can't be choosers. Now, as I was speaking, you may have noticed that I started on the next step of stripping the interior down. I decided to start with these side panels, which were largely held on with rivets and some Phillips screws. This was fairly easy to do with my trusty new air chisel, and I had it done in the span of a day. Once I had that done, there was a bit of a side project I needed to complete. In my last video on this project, I removed these seats, but I had yet to get rid of them. I figured that the steelyard wouldn't like it if I brought whole seats to the steelyard, so I had to strip the cushions off the frames. I spent a good couple hours on this, but it was worth it for the money I got back. Next, I started on removing what I call the seat rails. You may remember that in my last video, the wall side of the seats were mounted to this lip. At first, I tried to take out the rivets with just the air chisel, but this proved to be a time-consuming and back-breaking job. I soon resorted to cutting a slit in the head of the rivets with the grinder, and this made removing them much faster. These are the sorts of things that most other people wouldn't mention in their builds because it doesn't really make for good content. I try my hardest to talk about these things so that if there's anyone out there who wants to do their own build, they can see the difficulties that I experienced and learn from them so they don't make the same mistakes. For you guys, this will be something like 30 seconds. But for me, removing all those rivets took me a good day or two, but I got it done, which means that the next step was to pull the panels off. At this point, I was under the impression that these panels needed to be removed so that when I insulate, I could get in behind them, but I later realized that pretty much no one does this. Either way, I was determined to get them off, but this was quickly turning into a nightmare because not only were they bolted in between the rails and the outer wall, they were also glued down to the floor. I struggled to figure out how to get these off, and eventually I came to the conclusion that I would have to cut them. I wasn't happy about this, but I'd already committed, and overall, I'm happy that I ended up doing this, because it made some of the later work that I would have to do much easier. I also got this really cool slow motion shot of me using the grinder. The reason I don't do slow motion shots anymore is because my regular cameras don't have that function, so I had to prop up my phone to get that shot, and, well, shooting sparks near your phone is a good way to ruin a screen. So at some point I switched from a grinder over to a reciprocating saw, and I found that this was quite a bit easier. By the way, I know the technical term is reciprocating saw, but my family always just called them sawzalls. Is that just a Canadian thing, or do you all use that term too? Or do you guys have a different word that you use for this tool? I don't know. Comment below, and while you're at it, if you're enjoying my content, I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. It's by no means mandatory, but I am trying to make YouTube into a full-time career so that I can hopefully go on the road and bring you guys much more adventure content. Getting back to the build, the only issue I ran into with using the reciprocating saw was that it was battery powered, and I eventually ran out of charged batteries. At this point I was sick of working on this, so I came back another day and finished removing the panels off camera. By the way, did you know that I have a second channel? It's called Cinebeam, and it's primarily gaming content. So if you're into that sort of thing, feel free to check it out. I have a lot of fun with it, and I feel like it needs more love. I'll put a link in the description below. And that's all for this video. Hopefully you liked what you saw. Enjoy your day, and I'll see you in the next one.